Hey guys, I'm extremely excited to bring you the footage from our 2021 Wyoming hunting trip. Before we dive right into the film, I want to give you a little backstory about really what set this trip up and why it took place. So back in 2010, I got invited to go to Wyoming with a group of guys who've gone for years. We hunted Region Y, which is pretty much the Bighorn Mountain chain, the part of it that's in Wyoming. So 10 of us went out. A lot of guys shot deer. We seen some really nice deer that year. We tented in the Bighorns. I shot my first mule deer. I shot my first antelope on that trip. It was all DIY. We did everything ourselves. It was a ton of fun. All right. It showed me what Western hunting is really about. It wasn't until 2017 that I finally went back to Wyoming. We went mule deer hunting again back in Region Y. However, due to the 2016 winter being so hard, the mule deer population was pretty much decimated. So we spent a ton of time hunting. We put a lot of miles on our boots. I was lucky enough to fill my tag on a very young buck right by camp. That trip is what really led us to start looking outside of the box. We wanted to try something different. In 2019, we had a group of guys, it's actually just 4 of us that went. We decided to go to Region A, which is the northeast corner of Wyoming. There's a lot of people and not that much public land. You have the Black Hills National Forest, and then you have a ton of landlocked BLM and Wyoming state land that is just not accessible. 4 of us went out. We had some antelope tags, we had some deer tags. All 4 of us filled our deer tags. Jared shot a real nice buck in the Black Hills. We had a lot of fun, but you know, we wanted to try a different area. I started looking at going back to Region Y. Actually, that was the game plan until we started getting some reports from the locals out there. That led us to change our application back to Region A. Day 1 of the actual hunting trip finds us arriving in Wyoming about 1 in the afternoon. On the way, between crossing into Wyoming from South Dakota and arriving at our vacation rental in Pine Haven, we came across a group of antelope in the hunt area where Brandon had a tag. So we hurried up and drove past the antelope, got to the rental house, threw all our gear out, and we headed after those antelope. However, in the 45 minutes it took us to unload the gear and get back there, they had already moved off from the public land onto private. We're watching the animals run away. I turn and I start glassing some more public land that we can see about 2 miles away from where we're standing. And there, boom, there's another group of antelope. So we drop Jared and Brandon off at this little cutout in the land. So there's about a 6-foot ledge where they can stalk pretty close to these animals and not be exposed whatsoever. So. They get close to the animals. They're about 600-700 yards away. They start working around to the east, and the wind swirls. We could feel it change direction right at the truck, and the animals take off running. They only ran about 600 more yards. So Jared, with all of his expertise and his knowledge, tells Brandon, hey, we can keep moving. We're gonna have to crawl a little bit, but I think we'll be able to get in range of those goats. So meanwhile, I'm videotaping this whole thing, you know, from about a mile away on the road. That's about the closest I could get to them from the road. So we're just watching these animals. I didn't think they were gonna shoot because from our angle, they looked way too far away. I actually quit recording for a few seconds and then I heard a gunshot. As I turn the camera back on, I can see an antelope land on its side. And at that moment, I knew that Brandon connected with his first Wyoming antelope. I think he just shot that one. He got it. Brandon just punched his first antelope tag. Jared helped him stalk it. Looks like about a mile. Across real easy open country though, that's what we like. Gonna hump a few packs in, we'll chop it up. Try to get it out of here before the sun sets. First day, just got to Wyoming. About 3 hours ago, we unloaded. Got on 2 separate groups of antelope. And now, I got around them, got within about 330 yards, and Brandon connected with one, so. Can't wait to get in there and see the look on his face. Beautiful sight out here. Sun's going down. We're gonna try to make it work. So after only about 4 hours, we had our first antelope on the ground. We had our first tag punched for our 2021 Wyoming hunting trip. That just stoked us all up. It got us all excited. We got that antelope cut up. We got it packed out. We got to the meat processor by about 6:45, so about 15 minutes before they closed. Hunt day 2 finds us, we get up in the morning, we each picked out a few different spots to check out, and we just did a ton of scouting. We really just spent the whole day glassing and scouting from the truck and walking into these sections. And there's a few deer back in here. We've seen, I think, 1, maybe 2 bucks, one shooter, I think. This piece goes about 8 miles back. We're only about a mile or 2 in here, so we started pushing a couple deer, so we're gonna back out. We're still a day and a half before season, so or 2 days before season, so it's looking good already. There's one guy camping out here, so he'll definitely be hunting out here. Beautiful country out here. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but Devil's Tower's right over there. Let's see if I can get it to focus here. There's Devil's Tower. I think you can see it. All right. Beautiful country. We've seen a ton of animals. So one thing we're really concerned about with this trip is we had a bunch of people telling us that EHD was just killing off all the deer in the area. We got out there, we didn't expect to see much at all, but contrary to the reports we were getting, there was deer still, numerous deer still all over the place. We hiked into a bunch of different areas, did some glassing. We've seen a couple of really nice bucks on public land. So day 3 of the hunt would be Sunday, October 31st, Halloween. We had a spot that we picked out from some knowledge of our trip in 2019. We actually had killed a couple bucks out on this piece of public. We headed there first thing in the morning, and to our surprise, we seen several bucks. We glassed from the truck. We seen 2 mule deer bucks. We seen a group of does. We seen some really nice whitetail bucks. By mid-morning on the 3rd day of the hunt, our second full scouting day, we already started coming up with a pretty decent game plans on where we were going to start hunting for deer. We decided to shoot down and check out this square mile of public land. It's pretty close to Thunder Basin National Grasslands. It's where Pat shot his antelope in 2019. We glassed the majority of the north end. We drove down to the south end. And right up over top of the hill, we seen a small group of antelope. There's probably 4 or 5 of them out there. Jared's tag was for area 4. That's where this piece of public land was. So he grabbed his gun, threw on his orange hat, grabbed his license, and he headed down into a low spot to try to get a bead on these animals. So as he worked around, they actually started standing up. They were bedded down in this low spot. There's way more there than we thought. As I'm recording from the road, you can hear 3 shots. And then Jared jumps up onto the hill waving like he shot one. So we grabbed the packs, headed in again, and he got one. What is this, day 3 or 2? Sunday, October 31st, Halloween. Jared just killed a doe antelope, area 4. It's the second antelope we've killed here. Pat killed his here 2 years ago. It's a good little section. Wide open. Lots of sage. Lots of sagebrush. Lots of cactuses. Freaking cactuses everywhere here. They're nasty ones too. Just everywhere. Mid-morning, we filled our second antelope tag. Brandon shot his on day 1. Jared shot his on day 3. It was really just a scouting day. We just happened to come across antelope. It was about mid-morning. We called up Ellen and John and says, hey, we're going to shoot back to Sundance, drop off this antelope. We'll meet you there for lunch. We'll come up with a game plan for the afternoon. We arrived in Sundance about 12:03, pulled into the CNA meets, and they close every day from noon to 1 for lunch. So Pat says, hey, I got a doe antelope tag for Region 2. We're in the middle of Region 2 right here. Let's go check some public land. And to our surprise, the first piece of public land we drive up onto, Brandon snuck back on a hill, popped up, and there's a doe and a buck antelope bedded on that hill. Jesus. No. So Jared and Pat snuck up right to the backside of that rock pile, stood up. Those animals actually took off running. They were only about 50 yards away. They ran out to about 100 yards or so, and Pat dumped that doe and filled our last antelope tag. So that left us the whole afternoon of Sunday, October 31st to finish deer scouting. So we met back at the vacation rental after dinner, put together a game plan. Everybody had a good idea where they're going opening day, and went to bed to get some sleep. November 1st, opening day of firearm season in Wyoming in Region A. Brandon, Jared, and John actually headed up to a really big size chunk of BLM we found to the north. That goes about 8 miles in. So unfortunately, a lot of other people had the same idea they did, and they seen more hunters than deer. Pat and I hunted another chunk to the south where we seen a couple of bucks scouting, and we didn't see any mule deer in the morning, but we did see quite a few whitetails. I passed up a decent sized 9-point. All right, so let me show you what we're dealing with. I'm sitting on the edge of a hill right here. There's some pastures up here behind me and a big tabletop. Pat's about 1,000 yards that way, 800 yards, over about 3 more of these fingers that extend down. The top of that hill's all private land. This whole opening is public out here. There's a nice ridge line that goes all the way around the public. We glassed up a few mule deer on there yesterday, including one nice buck and one smaller buck over kind of where Pat's sitting. Those deer could actually be up in here. I spent the rest of opening morning hiking back up into the high ground back behind where we were hunting in the flats, trying to see if I could find a mule deer or a decent whitetail bedded up in there. So it was a great opening morning for me. I didn't fill a tag, but I still got to see some awesome terrain. I hiked up on a rock ledge and you could glass for several miles where I was. So it was a really cool experience, even though we didn't shoot a deer. So in the afternoon of opening day, Pat and I meet up with Brandon and Jared and John. Brandon, Pat, and myself went to the spot that we seen some mule deer bucks on scouting the day before season. So it worked out exactly as we hoped. That group of mule deer that we seen scouting, the two bucks had met up with the does. They turned and they ran back behind Brandon and I, which put them kind of downwind of us, but the first buck ran by with a group of does. The second buck actually slowed down and kind of stopped. Then eventually that buck walked out further to the right and gave Brandon a great shot, and he dropped it. So opening day, opening evening, we filled our first deer tag. Brandon shot an awesome 3x4 mule deer. His first mule deer ever, his first buck ever. He was super stoked about that, and that made us feel really good about the next day. All right, well, Brandon shot his buck, his mule deer tonight, about 3 to 4 hours ago. So let's see how it's coming along. Oh yeah, looks like it's coming along nicely. Fresh back straps, baby. Fresh back straps. The second morning, because we'd seen that group of mule deer there, we knew there was one more buck. Jared, Pat, and I all went back to that same spot where Brandon had shot his opening evening. Where I had seen my buck opening day, there's really no cover. So the second morning, I snuck in before it got light, and I actually hastily built a small rock blind, just something to give me a little bit of cover. I was still pretty exposed sitting out on this little ledge, but it gave me just enough cover where those deer could work in, and they wouldn't skyline. I seen the same 9-point that I had passed up opening day about 400 yards with another buck and a group of does actually came across from about 1.5 miles away. came across this opening and dropped down in this big ravine out in front of me. So the second morning, he actually got within about 225 yards. I could see he was a little bit bigger buck, and I decided to take him. I recorded the whole thing as I was watching the deer working up the canyon, kind of moving back and forth from ravine to ravine. Finally, as it popped up to my right, I actually knocked the camera over. I had to grunt to stop him because they were on a mission to get back up in that timber and bed for the day. So I grunted, he stopped, gave me a nice broadside shot, about 220 yards, smoked him.
As soon as he stops. He's down. He's down. Nice 8-point. 8-point whitetail. About the tips of his ears. Same one I passed up yesterday. I think it's the same one.
We quartered it up right there, threw it in our packs and got it out of there and made a game plan for the afternoon. So the second afternoon, I took Jared back with me to that same blind that I shot mine in the morning. Again, from that location, you can see down in those ravines that the deer like to work through as they come out into the public land or go back into the private land. So lucky enough, about an hour before dark, I look down in the ravine and here comes a mule deer doe. One right after another. Doe, doe, doe. We've seen a couple of does come out, and then that mule deer buck steps out between 350, 355 yards, somewhere around there, steps out broadside. Jared gets on it with his 308, makes a great shot. The deer ran about 10 yards and dies. The third day of our deer hunt, so this would have been November 3rd, we got Pat down into an area in the morning where we'd seen some decent mule deer bucks. We ended up glassing up some pretty nice deer. I got a few of them on film. Pat actually had a pretty nice shooter about 500 yards away from him. Couldn't quite get a shot on it, and it walked onto private land. So we glassed that whole area in the morning. We went back that night. The third afternoon, Pat and John spread out on this chunk of public land very close to where we had seen some real nice mule deer bucks. In fact, during the day they were bedded just a couple hundred yards onto the private, and it just didn't work out. I sat with Pat. We seen one doe come out. John and Ellen didn't see any deer. That group of mule deer bedded up on the ridge. They fed back down to the south and didn't come back onto the publics. The fourth day of our deer hunt finds us doing the same thing. John and Ellen were hiking way into the big sections. Jared and I kept taking Pat to some different areas. So unfortunately, we didn't harvest a deer on the third day of the hunt, nor the fourth. The fourth day found us doing the same thing, hunting different areas. John and Pat actually hunted that same spot the next morning to no avail. They didn't see any deer whatsoever. So the very last morning of the hunt, Friday, November 5th, finds us hunting back at that same spot where we had killed most of our deer. Jared and Brandon went coyote hunting for the day. I sat with Pat, and John and Ellen hiked back into where we had shot most of the deer. We heard John shoot, but before we could tell what John had shot, Jared and Brandon showed up and grabbed Pat and said, "Hey, we seen a couple of decent mule deer bucks on public land when we were out looking for coyotes. Let's go try to put a stalk on them." So I hiked in to see what John had shot. He was super stoked, his first Wyoming animal ever. So we quartered that up and packed it out. Meanwhile, Pat jumped in with Brandon and Jared. They hit up a piece of public land where they'd seen some mule deer bucks earlier in the morning. They actually got on a couple of small bucks. Pat got ready to shoot, and right when he was ranging and getting ready to shoot, a big old 2x2 buck stood up. Obviously the biggest buck in the group. Gave him about a 200-yard shot, and he dropped that sucker. So by mid-morning on the fifth day, we had completely tagged out 5 deer, 3 doe antelopes. It was just an amazing time. So we got all the meat to C&A Meats in Sundance, and they got everything cut up and deboned and packaged for us. And what was really cool about dropping it off there is they had everything froze for the trip home. So I want to thank you guys for watching. I had a ton of fun this year, and I hope everybody else did too. Our success on this hunt is really credited to, we've been there before. We hunted in 2019 in Region A. We went back this year. We had 2.5 days to scout an antelope hunt before our season. So with that, we were able to get on a lot of decent deer and get all of our tags filled. If you're ever thinking about hunting Region A in Wyoming, just know there's a lot of people. There's not a lot of public land that's accessible. You're gonna see tons of road hunters. You just gotta get off away from the road. Once you start getting a mile or two away from the road, you'll start seeing some good deer. So thanks for watching the video. I hope you guys had as much fun watching this as I did making it.